This section establishes what fire investigation actually is as a discipline. Before we discuss patterns, causes, or evidence, we need to clearly define the role and purpose of fire investigation. How we define this work will directly affect how we conduct investigations and how defensible our conclusions are later. Definitions matter because they guide methodology. In fire investigation, the language we use influences the steps we take and the conclusions we reach. Courts evaluate not just what an investigator concluded, but how they got there. Poor or imprecise definitions often lead to flawed investigative processes. Fire investigation is a systematic examination of a fire scene conducted to determine the origin and cause of a fire. The key words here are systematic and scientific. This is not based on instinct or experience alone. It is based on documented observations, data collection, analysis, and scientific principles. The primary purposes of fire investigation are to identify the origin of the fire, determine its cause, and support prevention, safety, and accountability. Investigations may have legal or insurance implications, but the investigator's role is not advocacy. It is objective fact-finding. Origin refers to where the fire started, while cause refers to how the fire started. A defensible cause determination cannot be made without first identifying a defensible origin. This sequence is critical and is a foundational principle in NFPA 921. Origin determination, which is identifying where the fire started. A defensible cause determination cannot be made unless a defensible origin is first established. Fire effects generally radiate outward from the area of origin. Investigators analyze these effects and work backward toward the area where the fire began. Origin determination relies on triangulation, meaning multiple indicators are evaluated and followed back to a common area. No single indicator should be used in isolation. Investigators work from the exterior to the interior and from the least damaged areas to the most damaged areas. This systematic approach helps prevent premature conclusions. Origin determination is a methodical, evidence-based process guided by the scientific method, not assumptions. Here we introduce cause determination, which explains how the fire started. Cause determination can only be made after a defensible origin has been established. Cause is determined by identifying the ignition sequence. This sequence explains how a fuel, an ignition source, and the circumstances came together to produce ignition. The fuel is the first material that ignited. The source is the competent ignition source that provided sufficient heat. The circumstances describe the conditions or actions that brought the fuel and source together. All three elements must be supported by evidence. If any part of the ignition sequence cannot be established, the cause cannot be reliably determined. Using the example shown, investigators must explain the sequence, how the lighter, the paper, and the circumstances interacted, not just state the result. Fire suppression and fire investigation are related but separate disciplines. Firefighters focus on extinguishment and life safety. Fire investigators focus on analysis after the fire. Experience in suppression can be valuable, but it does not replace the need for a scientific investigative methodology. Fire inspections are forward-looking and focus on code compliance and hazard reduction. In contrast, fire investigations are retrospective and focus on analyzing a specific event. Inspectors look for violations. Investigators look for evidence that explains what happened during a fire event. Fire investigation is not inherently a criminal investigation. Most fires are accidental. Criminality is one possible outcome, not a starting assumption. The investigator's responsibility is to determine origin and cause based on evidence, regardless of where that conclusion leads. The fire investigator is an objective fact finder who applies the scientific method to fire scenes. Investigators document observations, analyze data, develop and test hypotheses, and reach conclusions supported by evidence, not assumptions. Fire investigation requires a combination of training, education, experience, and adherence to accepted methodology. Experience alone is not sufficient. Investigators must be able to explain and defend their methods, not just their conclusions. Fire investigators have a professional and ethical responsibility to remain objective, accurate, and unbiased. Reports and testimony can affect lives, careers, and legal outcomes. Professional discipline starts with careful observation, documentation, and restraint. Fire investigation is a scientific discipline guided by definitions and methodology. Objectivity is mandatory. Everything we cover later in this course, patterns, origin determination, cause analysis, builds on these foundational concepts.